Hey guys, have you ever thought about how your physical pain may be something other than physical? I'm Dr. Meaghan Longyear, and this is my husband, Dr. Michael Longyear. And in a few moments, we're going to kind of jump into that and explain why.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Dr. Michael Longyear, and this is my wife, Dr. Meaghan Longyear, and we practice in Jacksonville, Florida. We're both chiropractors by training, but we've got into some different things. And I think in our practice and the way that we look at things, we offer kind of a unique perspective. And I think it's fun, especially in our office, because we're completely polar opposites in how we look at some things. Obviously, the name of the podcast is The Woo and Science, and we'll explain what that means a little bit as we go. But I am very much the left brain thinker, kind of science oriented person. I need 5 research articles to tell me why we're doing what we're doing. And my wife is definitely not that person. So we thought it would be fun to kind of chat through some of the complex cases and some of the common cases that we see in our office, and the two very different perspectives we come from when we're looking at those cases. And oftentimes it takes both of those to really understand what's going on.
And today we've got a very interesting topic talking about physical pain and how it's not always a physical thing, where there's other components that could be brought in. And that's where we'll be able to kind of share our individual perspective, as we had a couple interesting cases this week that came up, one very close to all of us. That we'll kind of talk through of how we can look at that in a different perspective, and how we can help get to the root of what the problem is and get people better and get ourselves better as well.
Yeah, I thought this would be a great intro topic because I think I know I'm usually quoted walking around the office saying there's no such thing as emotions. And I think as a guy, sometimes from a societal understanding, we're kind of taught that. But I think also just that macho mentality sometimes puts us there. But I had a flare up of some back pain that I was having. I've had back pain on and off. I played football, did a lot of things. So it's part of what got me into chiropractic. We'll tell my whole story at some point, I'm sure. But I had a really difficult case come in, and it was really bothering me because we made a lot of really cool changes in this case early on, and it looked like they were headed down the right road. And then they kind of reverted back in a lot of ways to where we started. And it really bothered me because I don't like failing, number one, but I really don't like it when patients are suffering. So this really bothered me. And, he came in and we did a follow-up, and it was maybe 20, 25 minutes after he left, I got up out of my chair and I felt a little twinge in my low back. And it wasn't that I did anything, we worked out pretty hard at the gym the day before, but it wasn't kind of a one-to-one where I could say it was maybe something I did lifting or something I did there. It was really weird. And I was kind of like, I don't know why my back is hurting. So we went down and we did all the physical stuff. I got my back adjusted as we normally do when I have some pain. We did something called flexion distraction. We did all the electrical stim on it. And, 2 or 3 days into having a bit of back pain, it kind of dawned on me. Maybe this is something other than physical, because I've done all the physical stuff that normally works and it hadn't really corrected it. So again, I'm usually the one that is quoted as saying there's no such thing as emotions and they're a figment of your imagination, but it was bugging me. So I had to reach out for help. And it dawned on me that maybe this physical pain could be emotional. Right. And so we started going down that rabbit hole a little bit and trying to work on it and work through it.
And how did it work out for you?
It actually worked really good.
Yes, we have this on recording.
Yeah, so I'm going to regret doing this podcast, I'm sure, at some point. I'm sure this is going to come up in front of me again. But, and when you dive into it, though, again, I definitely come from more the science place, and Dr. Meg will explain the emotional side of this more. But when you really look into the science, I love the idea of this woo and science, right? We always thought that this woo stuff, or I'll call it magical or ethereal things, were outside of science. But the reality is nowadays, you're starting to see much more of a blend of what was traditionally called woo and science. More people understand that, some of the things, just because we can't explain it with a double-blind clinical trial, doesn't mean there isn't some understanding to that. And I think in the emotional realm, is a really big one of those, and especially now in our world where people seem to be more stressed than they ever were. They have more things kind of thrown at them constantly all the time. Our brain doesn't really get as much time to rest or relax like it used to. And there's quite a few texts, if you will, or books out there that have started to really introduce this. A couple of our favorites I know is The Body Keeps the Score, is one that talks about how we store our emotions in different tissues in our body, and that can manifest as pain. My example was, this really hard case that I felt like I was carrying the weight of this person on me. And where's that breaking point for carrying the weight, right? It's kind of in that low back area.
So a lot of times when we have areas like Dr. Mike was saying, that his back, because of playing football and doing all kinds of different things throughout, is maybe a weaker point for him that he has to pay attention to. The different areas of our body can actually tell us information about where you might be, holding stress. Like the back hurts, but what does that mean? What is it that this emotional stress that I could be holding on to? The back is all about feeling supported.
Hold on, guys. This is where we get really weird. Okay. So we're going to go to some weird places in this podcast. But again, most of this stuff has a scientific basis, but some of this stuff is still a little in the clouds. But it really makes sense when you think about it too.
It does. We have a poster that we put up in our waiting room, and it's amazing how many times people will come up and point to the poster, to the area on the body, showing that that's exactly where my pain is. I always have hip pain, or I always have back pain. And then there's a description of what that refers to. So what the hips mean: a resistance to be able to move forward, an inability to be able to move forward. And a lot of times we can correlate that information in our own lives, and we can say exactly where I feel like I can't move forward. I feel like I'm stuck. I feel these kinds of things. The knees, feeling stubborn in the situation. Where are you feeling stubborn in your life? Where might you be holding back and not being able to work through? And in Dr. Mike's example with his back, being able to support somebody.
I'm never stubborn, by the way.
Never. Well, and I'm the one with the knee pain too. So,
Right.
I mean, that's kind of like an awakening call, I guess, right now, if pay attention to that when I'm being stubborn in my life. But it's interesting to think about when you look at that and then you're able to address that emotional piece, how that's going to free your body from the tension that your body's holding on to. So now that adjustment's going to help even more. So of course, we're going to adjust Dr. Mike again. We're going to make sure that things are, still moving and his brain's able to, communicate with that area of the body. But we've got to remove that emotional interference, or we're not addressing the whole problem. We're just getting a portion of it.
Yeah. And I think that's, a lot of physical things work really well. An adjustment can immediately relieve pain, and, a massage can immediately remove pain and get some things moving. But sometimes pain can be on a deeper level, especially when it's a reoccurring issue or something that comes up on a regular basis. We tend to hold on to, like, again, using the example from The Body Keeps the Score. There's certain, going back in traditional Chinese medicine, which is, we use a lot of that in the office, or versions of that. Neither one of us is an acupuncturist. We have an acupuncturist that works in the office. We have an acupuncturist that we refer to even outside of the office as well a lot. Traditional Chinese medicine really honed in on some of this stuff early. And again, this is where, like I say, it gets a little weird, but science is starting to support a lot of the weird stuff. And, for instance, and you can quote me or correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, but like our liver is where we hold a lot of our anger and our resentment. So even some of our long-term, like gallbladder issues might be more of a liver resentment, anger issue, that's something that we're holding on to. So it's where it gets a little weird. But again, that book, The Body Keeps the Score, there's another really good book by Dr. Hanscom,
Back in Control,
called Back in Control. He's a medical doctor who was a surgeon, and he did a lot of back surgeries. And what he found was, there's been a lot of research that disc lesions don't necessarily always equal pain, and having back surgery doesn't always get you out of pain. So he wanted to dig deeper. And what he found was some of his patients, they would have back issues, but there was almost this like catalyzing event that happened in their life that led to it. And when he did some things around them, maybe clearing that, or did some therapies or some treatments around those events, he realized they were canceling their back surgeries. And so he, and he's written books on this. He speaks all over the world on this stuff. He was talking about it to his partners, and said, hey guys, I think, I might have solved back pain. It might not be physical. Maybe we need to do some emotional work with these people. And they fired him. And because, and I'm not bashing medical doctors or pain anybody that does their thing, right? They all use their toolbox, and their set of tools was something that was more physically minded and maybe not so much emotionally minded. And it really wasn't anything that they wanted to jump into either.
But a lot of times, like he explained in his research and in what he was doing and applying with patients, and what, we also see with people when they come in here and we talk about that more emotional piece to it, it's not something that often is happening just overnight. It's something that we've been experiencing and we've been dealing with for quite a while. Some of, and I'm not going to quote exactly what he says in the book, but from what I remember exactly that he talked about is how when he would ask people, what happened, when your back pain started, it was like 20 years ago that the back pain started. What was going on in your life at that time? And people would say things like, that's, when I broke up with my, longtime, relationship, or, my pet passed away, or I lost my job. Big things that were affecting those people. And a lot of times when we're in the moment and we're, dealing with the stress of things that happen in life that everybody deals with, it's something that we're not going to process it right now. We have to just kind of be in that survival moment of something bad happened, and I'm just going to I'm going to survive this. Then I can go back and I can process it. And a lot of times we can efficiently do that. But when we don't give ourselves that place to be able to work through and clear those kinds of things. So, with back pain, if there's ever been other times that maybe you felt like you weren't able to help somebody or fix them, because I know your big loving heart, that's going to burden us over time, that we remember those things. A lot of times when we'll be doing emotional work with people, they'll burst into tears when we go back in time and remember something that happened to them a long, long time ago. And they're like, why am I crying? Because your body remembers what that felt like. You may not consciously remember what that's like every moment of every day, and that's great. But your limbic brain, your more survival brain, is remembering that. And that's affecting how your body is able to, move and feel and see the, the world that you're walking around in. So, these things happen over time. And as you get more congruent with your body and listen that, okay, that knee's starting to hurt me again, let's investigate and see. I've gotten x-rays done. I've gotten all these different, structural things done. Let me investigate to see, is there something going on that might be a little bit deeper to my awareness that I might not understand? And oftentimes it's, something that people kind of jump right on. Yeah, I remember that this makes sense to me. Yes, this is, and they can put it together so that they can do some work to kind of release some of that. But without recognizing that weird wooey kind of part of it, that then the body's just going to keep trying to self-resolve it. But, you've got to be able to find ways to be able to actually release that in conjunction to other things that you're doing. Otherwise, it's just kind of like it's just sitting there camped out and just causing chaos in your body. And that's just not what we want. That's no fun.
Well, and I think, that's something I want to stop there for a second and highlight something that you said, because I think it's important to understand this. When we talk about the woo stuff, and I jokingly say emotions aren't real and that kind of thing, but there's parts of the brain that are actually responsible for this, and they're more primitive parts, right? Emotions have a meaning in our life, and they have a point. And so she kind of really quickly said this term called limbic, or the limbic brain. The limbic brain is a deeper structure in our nervous system, and it's responsible for survival. All it really cares about is us getting to tomorrow. It doesn't bring in consciousness or cognition or, being intelligent or any of those things. So when your limbic brain, there's an area called the amygdala. And I think that's what causes a lot of our problems, because it's responsible, again, for survival. And when the amygdala gets really wound up, one of the main emotions that the amygdala feels is fear. And so when you're scared of something, you're on heightened awareness. And so you're much more prone to be able to protect yourself. It keeps you away from things like vulnerability. If you've ever heard of Dr. Brene Brown, she talks a lot on vulnerability, and that's what makes us human. And really, that's what allows our brain to connect to others, is being vulnerable. But when we get stuck in what the literature calls amygdala hijacking, when the amygdala starts to run, and this is why I think we're starting to see this happen a lot more, especially in our office and in our world. A lot of what we're being fed on a regular basis, whether it's media, whether it's this, that, or the other thing, a lot of it's fear, because fear gets people to click, right? You've heard the term clickbait. Well, if it activates that amygdala, you're going to click on it. And they do this on purpose because it sells ads. It sells all of these things to us. And so we're in this state in our world right now where our amygdala is kind of running the show. And what that amygdalar hijacking means, or that limbic hijacking, or what we refer to in the office as limbic loops, you get stuck in these limbic loops. It literally shuts down an area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is important because that's the part that makes us human. If you look at everywhere that you read, what separates us from the animals is that our prefrontal cortex is larger. We have the ability to control our emotions. If you look at a dog, they are much more primal, right? You've heard that term primal before. Primal means more instinctive. You do things that are just about living till tomorrow. You don't really see the big picture, realize everything's going to be okay, use that cognitive brain to control things. And when the limbic loops are running the show, we lose the ability to do that. And that's where I think we're starting to see a lot of health and dis-ease or disease start to happen in our bodies and in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And when this happens, like long term, right? So like in my case, it was unfortunately I had to buck up and admit that emotion could be the problem, and we had to do some work around that. And it was kind of crazy. And I'm always surprised by this because, again, I'm definitely the left brain science guy. Emotions are messy. I don't want to spend time to deal with my emotions,
But
which is
messy.
they are messy.
They're so not
You got
messy.
people like cry
They're
and all that stuff.
insightful. They give us understanding.
I'm sure they do, and they have meaning. And trust me, I'm joking. A lot of this is whatever, but emotions are messy, and a lot of times we're meant to, and we need to, in a moment, push through emotions and get through things because we still got to get the job done, right? And that's part of why I think we don't necessarily take the time to go back and reflect. Like most people I know don't journal what happened during the day, which is a great way to go back and reflect on some of those things. But we push through these emotional barriers and we push through and we get through the day, right? But it doesn't mean that our brain necessarily let go of it. And when we end up in that survival state, you'll end up with creating all of these, again, these limbic loops. We shut down prefrontal. And one of the things that our frontal lobe does, in addition to connecting us to others, seeing the big picture, realizing there's things that are outside of ourselves, it also inhibits pain. So when that amygdala winds up and it gets really strong and it starts to run the show, it opens it up to all of these other pain syndromes, conditions, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, chronic low back pain, chronic knee pain, like all of those things. Your frontal lobe loses the ability to control those, and we store it in tissues, and that can become the prevalent thing, right? So we end up with a lot of these signals or these loops kind of winding up on each other and becoming the dominant program in our brain.
Yep. We had an interesting case that we worked on, and I'm going to talk about it was amazing as we've been working through helping her, brought in her complaint of high blood pressure, and so we've been focusing on working on that. And so she brought up a topic of how she at 3:30 every day just is exhausted and she needs to go lay down and take a nap, and then she wakes up and she feels fine, but every day, same time, every time. A lot of patients that'll wake up at the same time every day. So if like you have a time, I'm always waking up at 2 a.m. Each organ system, if you Google meridian clock, you can see the different times and the different organ systems that correlate, and add more information if you need to. Because
I told you it was going to get weird.
I know you like your science stuff, but so when we looked on the time clock and we noticed that was the bladder meridian at the time that she was always falling, needing to go to sleep. So then she mentioned, when I said, well, that's the bladder meridian. And she mentioned how, that she never seemed to have problems, that she'd have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. But lately she's been doing that every single morning. And so, that calls my attention to, okay, so there's something the body's communicating. That is a sign that the body having it happen all at the same time, the same organ system. Now, like, here's two pieces that we're bringing together. Great. Let's investigate and see what might be going on there that the body's trying to maybe process, release, work through. But there's that stuck, that problem. Sometimes it presents with pain, and you have, like we've been talking about with back pain, there might be physical pain, but sometimes it's just the function that something's not working. That could be any organ system in your body. So we did some checks to see, is it, could be something you're eating in your diet, could be something that your environment, pollen or something that could be causing issues, could be structural. We need to adjust you or get some acupuncture done. And it turned out that it was an emotional thing. So we went back and we cleared out the emotional. And so I loved it, because it was pretty exciting that it lined right up. Like sometimes it does that, sometimes it's a hot mess express, and it's like the body doesn't give us a clear little pathway like our neocortex and our analytical little brains like to have. But sometimes it shows up like this, and it's pretty neat. And when we can go back and realize that, doing a lot of these techniques of structure and, different kind of stress reduction kind of things are great, but there was some stress in those tissues that was leading to some kind of block that we needed to kind of work through in order to keep moving forward. So of course, follow-ups are always exciting of, well, did we find that we were napping at the exact same time anymore? So looking forward to seeing this patient next week and seeing, if there were some changes and stuff. And that's the kind of clues that our body will give us. And then we can investigate further to find out what is it that's kind of hanging out in those tissues that needs to be, worked through and addressed and given some attention to. That's why I don't think emotions are so bad. It's almost like a little kid that just wants to tell the story of something that happened, and they just want to share that. And that's fantastic. Like, let's share that. Let's honor that, part of ourselves that went through something and survived it and got through it. But there was a scary moment. We get a lot of kids in here, then the kids come in, and, it's been very humbling in doing this job and recognizing that, here I am at 44 doing this work and going back in time to situations in my life that happened when I was little and trying to remember. Sometimes it comes up as a big explosion of emotions and I cry my eyes out or I sweat really bad because I'm processing and my physiology is changing. Sometimes it's like I don't really remember what it felt like to be that second grader that, got called a name on the playground and then my feelings were hurt, until that second grader shows up in my office and we start working on what they're going through. And you can see the emotion and how hard it is for them in that moment. So we forget that some of these things we've gone through are hard. We forget just how much of a struggle that was. If you're a parent and you have kids and you see how your kids are, trying to get through and deal with some of the stuff in school or learning or not feeling like they're fitting in, all of those things, they're surviving in that moment. And that's part of life. We have to do that. But we need to also have ways to be able to allow our body not to hold on to that in our tissues, that then over time can create some of these feelings and these emotions that, get stuck in areas that, cause issues and pain and all kinds of things that are undesirable and we don't want to be dealing with.
Well, and I think, again, you said something that I think is another highlight. It is how your nervous system and your brain works.
Mhm.
We've all heard the term neuroplasticity, right? And I love that term. And it's, the neuroplasticity, for those of you guys that haven't heard it, is essentially the brain's ability to learn new things. And when I mean new things, I don't mean like how to make a recipe, but learn new automatic reflexes and patterns and those types of things. Neuroplasticity is a great thing. It's something that is important. It's what allows us to unwire bad habits. It's what allows us to learn and grow and become a better person every day, right? Neuroplasticity isn't always good, though. And I think that's something that when you look at the emotional brain, especially when you look at some of the negative emotions like fear and anxiety and depression, the brain will get really good at whatever you tell it to do, right? Like, so neuroplasticity, if I want to learn a new trick, like let's say I want to learn how to play basketball. If I shoot baskets on Monday and then I shoot baskets again Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, my brain, because of the repetition, will get really good at that. But the same is true like with anxiety and with depression or with chronic pain. When you have pain in an area for so long, whether it's emotional or physical, at some point, if it keeps getting that signal and keeps getting that signal, the brain's going to get really good at that. And pain it's not a bad thing either. So neuroplasticity isn't always good. You can have negative neuroplasticity where like the brain learns pain, it learns anxiety, it learns depression, but pain isn't bad either. Pain is a signal that something's wrong, that you need to stop and pay attention to it. It's just when it persists that it can become a problem. And when it, interrupts our activities of daily living is, the ICD-10 code around this, right? Or the diagnosis code around this. When it disrupts how we live and how we function, that's when it becomes a negative thing.
Mhm.
So neuroplasticity, if we allow our thoughts to be negative and we allow ourselves to live in that place of fear, again, your brain's going to get really good at what it's told to do. So if you, and again, no offense to the newscasters, but if you watch the news every day, they're going to feed you fear. And if you do that every day, your brain gets really good at that emotion.
Mhm.
And when you feed that, you neuroplastically wind up on that negative emotion, that fear, that anxiety, which then neuroplastically or changes the function in the brain to downregulate your prefrontal cortex. And so now everything becomes a stressor.
Mhm.
Everything becomes an enemy. Everything becomes something that's stacked against you, as opposed to being able to use your cognitive brain and break it down and really see past some of those things, right? And pain is no different. Your brain will wind up around pain if it's emotional, if it's physical, if it's whatever it is.
Yep.
And so it'll disrupt sleep schedules. And that's where,
Mhm.
again, we talk about how it gets weird and the science, or the woo versus the science. And I think to some degree, somehow traditional Chinese medicine or meridian system is still considered woo-woo or kind of out there, even though it's been around for over 5,000 years, right? But the science is finally starting to show that, maybe they were onto something with a
Mhm.
lot of this stuff. Things like organ clocks and timing, they actually have a lot of basis in science and a lot of support in science to say that what they're saying is maybe a little bit more appropriate than what we thought in the past.
That's what we see. Like a lot of people that have gone, I have a back problem. I go to my orthopedic, I do some PT, but it didn't quite resolve. So that's a lot of the patients that we see here that I've tried all the traditional medicine stuff. The steroid injections didn't help for long term, didn't fix the problem. So they end up here looking into these holistic things. Now, and I was raised more on that, popping medicine whenever there was, a stomach ache or anything like that. Whereas now the awareness of just looking to see what's going on there. Like, why am I having these stomach problems? Why am I having these kinds of discomforts in my body that just came about? Normally it's like I said earlier, it's been something that's probably been building for a while and it's not something that just happened. We get to that point of, okay, the body can't take anymore. So now we're feeling a lot of this chronic, this pain that's been kind of building up over time. But it's interesting how when people come in here and the stuff we do looks weird and holistic stuff can, like Chinese medicine, that they say that's been around 5,000 years, isn't it? That's what
Yeah,
somebody
over
said the other day.
5,000 years.
That's amazing. And the results, and you talk to people about how much when your body can get into, a more open, barrier free, we're not having this stagnant energy, this stuck, the same way we look at it as chiropractors, that if something's not moving and flowing like it's supposed to, there's an interference. We need to remove the interference. And that could be something you're eating. It could be something that you're constantly thinking about, creating these neuroplastic loops that are more negative than more positive. So whatever it is, it's something that can be investigated. And oftentimes there's, resolution can come about pretty quick if, you're doing the work and taking the life changes and things like that to help your body with whatever it's pretty much screaming at us that, there's an issue here, something's wrong, and I need your help. But getting to that root of whatever that is and changing that pattern is, a good way to be investigating and looking so that it's not something that comes back and it's not lingering, but we can actually get through it, move on, and be more positive and healthy in our body.
And that's just it, right? It's about breaking the cycle. And I
Mhm.
think, in our world, we tend to, again, we get really good at what we do. And the more that we do it, the more it becomes habit and the more it becomes wound into our system and becomes part of who we are. And so it's really about breaking some of those things and decreasing the ability for our brain to set up in that, right? So the more that we have those negative thoughts, the more that we drive that, the more we end up in this neuroplastic change around the negativity, around the depression, around the anxiety. And we're talking about pain today, but as we go through and we do this series, we're going to talk about a lot of different conditions and different ways that we look at things, right?
Mhm.
Again, we are polar opposites in a lot of ways. It's funny. She does our number charts and our astrological, like
Oh,
Aquarius and
yes.
all of this. We are oil and water in
Complete
almost
opposites.
everything. And
Everything.
and I do think some of that is why I think it helps us to kind of grow and work in that way too. But I think that different perspective, I think opposites attract in a way. I think that different perspective, looking at things from literally two sides of the coin, is what allows us to really understand what's going on and see things differently. Like she said, we get a lot of patients that have been everywhere else. We're
Mhm.
usually the last stop on somebody's journey. They've done all the other things because a lot of times those initial things, an adjustment from, chiropractic can be the thing that fixes you because initially it is probably physical.
Mhm.
But when those things are allowed to set up, they're allowed to neuroplastically change your brain. That's when we need to go a little bit deeper. And that's where I really think the woo meets the science, in that we use a lot of these things to change neuroplasticity, but also they can maybe come out of left field and we'll talk about frequencies as we go through the different podcasts and the different weeks, and months. And really where some of this stuff is hitting the science and working through that. One great way, and I want to kind of leave you guys with this, something that you can start with right off the bat, is breaking that cycle. Again, I said most people don't journal. We don't have time for that stuff, right? I love the meme. Ain't nobody got time for that. And I think that's true. In our world, we're running and gunning and moving and going and doing a lot of things. But even if you don't have the time to sit and journal, take the last 2, 3 minutes before you close your eyes or after you close your eyes and just run through everything that happened in the day and do it from a place of safety, right? Because you're in your bed, you're comfortable, you're safe. Think about maybe those negative things and kind of see what you were supposed to learn from them. And this is kind of how I finish my day. Like, was there some lesson that I'm missing, some lesson I was supposed to grab? I don't write it down, but I constantly, before I go to sleep, I'm constantly going, all right, what was I supposed to learn? How can I grow from that situation? And even just taking that 2 or 3 minutes is a way to break that cycle of the negativity and kind of reframe your brain.
And then on top of that, I love that you do that. I think that is so fantastic and wonderful. I didn't realize you did that. So just makes my heart happy. I love writing down tough situations that I've had, and I recommend this to my patients. I've had lots of them that find this is something they'll do pretty regularly. Write down whatever that situation, whatever it is that you went through, whatever feelings kind of came up, and then go burn it. Take that piece of paper and I
Start
know
it on fire. Burn this thing
in a
down.
safe way. Let's not create more problems by burning something down, but doing it in a safe way where you can
In
go
your
and then
sink.
burn that, yes, where water is nearby, but writing that out. And sometimes that looks like just one page, maybe that's a paragraph, maybe it's 6 pages, but something that came up that's really weighing on you, and you find that you're perseverating on those memories or those thoughts. Write it all out, maybe read through it, and then burn it and watch it turn to ash, like you're letting that go. And then before you're falling asleep, to be able to go through the different things that, where the lesson, like Dr. Mike is saying, what lesson I could have gotten out of this, kind of just reflecting on the gratitude of the things that went well in the day. Those things are wonderful ways to end your day. So here's a little nugget of information that I would like for us to be giving at the end of each of these podcasts, of something you can take away and maybe start applying in your life, and see if that's something that helps you kind of free up where you might be storing some woo, some energy, some emotion, and
Some weird
not
stuff.
not allowing yourself to be free of that, even though obviously your intention is to feel good and you want to feel better. So here are some little ways that you can start applying in your day and share with your family and friends, and see if that shifts you a little bit, if it breaks that energy pattern that you're in and allows you to see things a little bit more brighter and be feeling a little bit less weighted down.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you guys for joining us.
We look forward to doing these in the future and you joining us again.